Katy Perry just won $1.84 million from an 85-year-old veteran, and the internet is losing its mind. Some are calling it unforgivable. His family calls it heartless. And Katy Perry? She hasn't said a word. 4 years of legal battle, millions at stake, and a man battling a terminal illness. On the surface, it looks like a wealthy pop star enforcing her rights, but when you dig into the court documents, the timeline, and the medical records, it becomes clear this story is far more complicated than most headlines suggest. This isn't just a celebrity suing someone. This is a collision between law, morality, and human vulnerability. Let's start at the beginning. Carl Westcott is not just any homeowner. He's an 85-year-old U.S. Army veteran, a man who served his country and later built a successful business empire as the founder of 1-800 Flowers. He owned a sprawling Montecito estate worth $15 million with 8 bedrooms and 11 bathrooms. It was his sanctuary, the place where he planned to spend his final years. In July 2020, Katy Perry and Orlando Bloom set their sights on that very property. Negotiations were swift. An offer was made, and Westcott accepted. On July 14, 2020, the contract was signed. But timing matters. Carl Westcott had just returned home from major back surgery. He was taking prescription opioids to manage pain, recovering from a serious medical procedure. His family would later argue he was not in his right mind when he signed. Just 8 days later, he sent a letter attempting to rescind the contract, claiming he was medicated, groggy, and not fully aware of the agreement he had made. From his perspective, this was a moment of vulnerability. From Katy Perry's perspective, the contract was binding. Her legal team made it clear, the deal stands, and if Westcott tried to back out, they would sue for damages. Fast forward to November 2024, and a judge ruled in Perry's favor. Carl Westcott, now battling Huntington's disease, a terminal and progressive neurological disorder, was ordered to pay $1.84 million in damages. The court cited lost rental income, property maintenance costs, and legal fees as reasons for the judgment. The public reaction, however, was immediate and brutal. Headlines called it unforgivable. Social media exploded with outrage. People saw a wealthy celebrity taking money from a sick, elderly man, and the backlash was swift and emotional. To understand why the case became so divisive, you need to look at both sides. On one hand, Katy Perry and her team argued that Carl Westcott was fully competent when he signed the contract. Medical experts evaluated him shortly after signing and testified that he understood what he was doing. He had legal representation and time to review the contract. 8 days later, his attempt to rescind was seen as simple seller's remorse. From a legal standpoint, Perry's case was solid. She had spent millions, lost potential rental income, and her property could not be used while the lawsuit dragged on. But the other side tells a different story. Westcott's family painted a picture of an elderly man, just days out of major surgery, medicated, and facing the challenges of aging. They argued he was pushed into the deal by a real estate agent and his business manager at a moment when he was vulnerable. For them, this was exploitation, a wealthy celebrity enforcing her rights against someone who might not have been in a position to fully consent. To the public, this felt like a moral failure, even if the law sided with Perry. The timeline itself adds to the controversy. July 2020 was the height of the pandemic, a time when wealthy buyers were fleeing cities for estates in Montecito, where Oprah, Ellen DeGeneres, and Prince Harry all owned property. Katy Perry and Orlando Bloom found Westcott's estate, negotiations moved quickly, and a contract was signed. Days later, Carl Westcott tried to back out. By the end of that month, Perry had threatened legal action. From that point on, a 4-year legal battle began. Depositions were taken, medical records examined, and expert witnesses testified. Every step of the process drew public scrutiny, fueled by the question, was Perry legally right or morally wrong? Central to Perry's claim was the concept of equitable conversion in California real estate law. Even though the sale had not closed, the doctrine gives buyers certain rights to the property once a purchase agreement is signed. Perry argued that because Westcott refused to complete the sale, she lost potential rental income, estimated at around $1.5 million over the 4-year dispute. She also claimed additional damages for property upkeep and legal fees. While the numbers are substantial, they are legally defensible, even if they feel harsh from a human perspective. Meanwhile, Carl Westcott's health deteriorated. Huntington's disease, a progressive neurological disorder, gradually robs a person of cognitive function, motor skills, and independence. By the time the ruling came down, Westcott was no longer just recovering from surgery, He was fighting a terminal illness. His family publicly lamented the emotional and physical toll the lawsuit had taken. One family member told Realtor.com all he wanted was to stay in his home. That's it. And now he's being forced to pay nearly $2 million to someone who doesn't need it. The optics were difficult to ignore. An 85-year-old veteran battling a terminal illness, facing a court-ordered judgment against a pop superstar worth hundreds of millions. Yet from a legal perspective, the judge's ruling was clear. Evidence and testimony indicated that Westcott understood the contract and its consequences. He had signed willingly with legal counsel, and medical records did not support claims of incompetence. The judge explicitly stated that he had the mental capacity to understand the nature of his actions. The law had been applied correctly. The public, however, often prioritizes emotion over legality, and that is where the backlash came from. Perry's silence throughout the ordeal only intensified public criticism. She made no statement defending her actions, no post explaining her side, and no apparent acknowledgement of Westcott's condition or the controversy. Her social media continued to promote music and projects, creating the perception of indifference. For many, this cemented a narrative of a celebrity using her wealth and power against a vulnerable individual. Others suggest her lawyers advised her to say nothing. Any public comment could complicate ongoing legal proceedings or future appeals. Regardless, her reputation in the court of public opinion has shifted, even if her legal victory is secure. This case raises bigger questions about law, morality, and human responsibility. Contracts exist to protect business and property rights, and if everyone could back out at the first sign of regret or medical complication, the system would fail. Katy Perry was legally within her rights to enforce the contract and pursue damages. But does legality always align with morality? Many argue that a woman with hundreds of millions of dollars could have absorbed the loss, allowed Westcott to remain in his home, and avoided a drawn-out legal battle. Others counter that doing otherwise could set a dangerous precedent, undermining the enforceability of contracts. Adding to the complexity, the public is divided between two narratives. One sees a legal victory for a pop star enforcing a binding contract. The other sees an elderly veteran, medicated and unwell, being forced into financial obligation against his will. Both are factually accurate. Both tell a true story. And both lead to completely different conclusions about what justice looks like in this situation. That gap between what is legal and what feels right is exactly why this case has captivated public attention. Financially, the judgment has real consequences for Westcott. Even as a successful entrepreneur, he is 85, retired, and battling a costly terminal illness. Huntington's disease requires round-the-clock care, expensive medical equipment, medications, and assistance. If Westcott cannot pay the judgment, Perry's legal team could place liens on assets, force the sale of the property, or garnish income. The very home Westcott wanted to live in during his final years could end up sold or encumbered as a result of the lawsuit he tried to avoid. For Katy Perry, the outcome is very different. She recovered $1.84 million, enforced a valid contract, and maintained her legal standing. But public perception remains complicated. Headlines focus less on her music and more on the lawsuit, creating a narrative that may linger far longer than any chart-topping single. Her brand, once associated with fun, empowerment, and resilience, now exists alongside a story that has divided fans and critics alike. When you strip it all down, this case isn't just about a mansion or a celebrity. It's about choices people make when they have power, money, and legal rights. It's about how the law protects agreements and enforces contracts, even when doing so feels uncomfortable. It's about what we value. Is it being legally correct, or is it being morally compassionate? Katy Perry made her choice. Carl Westcott made his. And the court enforced the contract. The public, meanwhile, continues to debate who is in the right. So here's the one-line takeaway. Katy Perry won the case. Legally, she is correct. Morally, that's up for debate. This story forces us to consider the gap between law and empathy, between rights and responsibility. If you were in Perry's shoes, would you have enforced the contract or walked away? Would you prioritize legality or compassion? There is no objectively correct answer, and that is exactly what makes this case so fascinating. As for Carl Westcott, he is still alive, still battling Huntington's disease, and still facing the judgment. His family's frustration and heartbreak are real. And while the law protects agreements, it does not shield anyone from public scrutiny or moral questioning. For Katy Perry, the victory is financial and legal. For the public, it's a moral puzzle that sparks debate about wealth, power, and human decency. This story will continue to be discussed, dissected, and debated for years, because it touches something deeper than celebrity gossip. It touches our sense of justice, empathy, and how we reconcile the letter of the law with the human heart. Katy Perry won in court, but the public is still deciding the rest. And that's the real drama behind the headlines. So, what do you think? Was Katy Perry right to pursue this lawsuit? Legally, there's no question the judge ruled. But morally, would you have enforced the contract or let an elderly man keep his home in his final years? Drop your answer in the comments. Be honest, because this story isn't just about celebrities or mansions. It's about power, choice, and what we truly value in moments that test our ethics. Subscribe if you want more stories that go beyond the headlines, revealing the human truth behind celebrity disputes, legal battles, and moral dilemmas. Next video drops in 3 days, and you won't want to miss it.